Hey guys, back in the workshop again, putting together some jerk blocks, deadlift blocks, plyo blocks, whatever you want to use them for. All you're going to need is some plywood. I've got a whole pile of leftover rough cuts, so I'm going to use that up, but obviously if you don't have that, some new sheets will be handy. Some timber for the top block for some added support. I've got 70 by 45. 17mm ply is the ply that I'm using. Some rubber matting for the top, just save on the impact from the weight, so if you're jumping on it, give you a bit of traction underfoot. Some glue, some short screws, all that sort of stuff. As for tools, got power saw, all the marking and cutting stuff, some drills, straight edge some clamps for ripping down the plywood and getting those cuts nice and straight. Alright, let's get started. So, how we're going to make these ones is we're going to basically start out with making some 100mm high blocks, and then some 300mm high blocks, and then 600mm high blocks. And basically the idea of that is so you can start with lower blocks and then build them up, so you can use them for all sorts of different stuff. So you set them up as jerk blocks, block pulls for jumping, whatever you want to do. So I'll start with the top platform, which will be the only one with the rubber on the top, because the idea is that always ends up on the top. What we're going to do is use some of these offcuts that I've got before, rip them down to 100mm. The way I'm going to do that is just using my saw guide. Measure it out to 100mm, and then rip these boards down. If you don't have a saw guide, you can always use just a straight edge and some clamps, which you're going to need for some of the other stuff anyway, to rip it down. So let's get these first bits ripped down and we'll go from there. So, when you're marking them up, get your first one. I'm going to make him 500 by 800 because that gives a decent width without being too big, because I need to find somewhere to put them, and wide enough that if you want to jump onto them, there's a decent width that way as well. So the first thing to do will just be to mark your first one and square it through. Cut that one off, make sure it's dead right, and then mark that one as your pattern, and you can use that one to mark all the rest. Don't mark one, use one, mark the next one, cut that one, and then use the next one every time, because you might build up a little bit of cumulative error that way as well. So if you use the same pattern for every single time, it'll just eliminate that risk of error. So alright, let's start cutting them up. Alright, next thing to do will be to make the tops of the boxes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip down an entire sheet to 800 wide. That leaves me a 400 wide offcut, which I can use for some of the stacks for the boxes. So what I'm going to do is measure in 800 minus the width of the saw base. So because you'll see edge of the saw base will sit up against the straight edge, but the blade will cut out here, got to allow for that extra little bit of width. And we just clamp it down, rip it down, and that'll make the tops of the platforms. Alright, so just ignore the costume change, had a bit of a distraction, but everything's cut and ready to go to start putting together for the boxes. Got all the sides ripped down. Stop rails for the top piece, stop your weights right off the end, add some extra support for the top piece because that's going to be the one that takes most of the load. And then the plywood to close on the tops of the box. So, first thing to do will be to glue the box together. So take 2 of your long ends, 2 of your short ends, and then we'll start gluing and screwing it together. After you've got everything cut ready to go, this is the pretty well the easy part. Just glue the joints, bead up there. Those two together, nice and flush on the end. And a couple of screws. Now you get your box together. Next thing to do will be to stick on a sheet of 18mm ply on the top. So all we're going to do for that is bead glue around the outside. Then we just square it up with an edge. And then you can just square the bottom box up to the ply and stick an extra couple of screws in the middle just to stop it all going around. Now for the top one, what we're going to do is we're going to stick these rails on each end. And what they're there for is so when you drop your weights on it, they don't roll back and forth and roll off your blocks, especially if you've got it stacked up pretty high. You obviously don't want that to happen. So what we'll do this with it flipped over because it'll probably be a little bit easier. Put a bead of glue on the back of there. I'll use liquid nails for that because it's a bit more heavy duty. Line it up with the edge of your block. And a few screws through from the bottom. Same for the other side. So one thing we can do that's slightly different with the top one to all the rest is chuck some extra timber hard up against the plywood on the inside, and that'll just help support the weight when you have Eddie Hall come through and drop 500 kilos on your deadlift blocks. So I've just used 70 by 45. Really I've just used it because what I've got handy, but the ply should be pretty strong anyway, so just something in there just to give it that extra stiffness that you need. Cut your blocks nice and tight. Jam them in there. And a couple of screws from each side. So what we end up with is the bottom looking like that. So you get your 3 rails to help support the weight. And then your rails either end on the top. And then we just get some of this 12mm rubber matting and just cut it the size to fit inside there, and that'll just protect your blocks a bit when you're dropping your weights back down on there. Also, I'd say help protect your weights, but your weights should be fine against timber. So yeah, mainly just protect your blocks and make sure they last over time. Do with the matting, cut the size, chuck good work of glue on the back. Then we stick the glue. And slot that in there. Press that in there. Should sit in there nice and tight. And there's a few screws in, just hold it in place while the glue goes off. That's your block done. Just let the glue dry and be ready to go. Alright, there are a couple of major differences between the top one and all the rest. They won't have any extra supports in the middle because if they're all stacked on top of each other properly, the load should go down through the plywood all the way to the floor. The compressive strength of plywood is pretty good, so you don't really need to worry about it. And instead of rubber and rails on the top, we're just having an extra layer of plywood. So the reason for this is it's slightly smaller than the top one. The thickness of the edge is smaller than the top one. So when you stick your next layer on top, slots on top, locks together, so you drop your weights on it, the blocks aren't going to separate and fall over and something bad's going to happen. So, stick down much the same way as the rubber. Good whack of glue. And then find yourself a couple offcuts of Plyo, same width as the sides. Flip them over. Try not to get your glue anywhere you don't want it to be. What you're going to want to do is make sure it's even both sides. And then screw it down. Alright, so we've got that 12mm ply on the top, and that basically makes it so it's a slightly smaller size than the other one, so it fits inside the next layer, locking them all together. So when you chuck that one on top, they lock together nicely. Pretty well every single layer is the same. I've got 300mm high blocks, including the top one. One 300mm high, one 400mm high, and one 600mm high. And the only difference between the 100mm high ones and all the rest is I've got this rail inside the middle, stepped up enough to not hit that 12mm spacer, but it's just there to stop the sides of the box just getting a waving. So as you can see, I've made a pretty high stack. That's so I can use it for overhead carries. If I have someone come in with a vertical leap that's above my head, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you got a nice little solid block for all your jumping, jerking, pulling needs. Well, if that helped you out, give it a like, comment below, subscribe to the channel. See ya!